8:31, but it is on a limited timeline. Yes, it's on list number 30. Something you've heard before. We voted it, ladies and gentlemen. It has not been reported to the floor. There was some concern about the bill, and, well, let me just stop there. Is there a motion?
Motion for what?
May I start and then see if there's a motion? Why we're asking for the reconsideration?
Well, I think we should move.
Fine.
There's a motion to reconsider the bill. Is there a second for the motion? Okay. Now I can either call on Senator Washington or call on the Vice Chair to speak to the reconsideration.
Just quickly, I just got some additional information to better inform my vote. I would have voted differently if I had gotten that information. So that's why I think we should reconsider the vote.
Chairman. To refresh your memory, this is what I called the kitchen sink bill. It came in as 17 possible issues. We narrowed it down to about 10 that were easy, nonpartisan, obvious, and make our election system run more smoothly. Unfortunately, we passed 2 amendments that caused problems, and so we are hoping that the committee will reconsider. One of the goals that I think we all share is enabling people with disabilities to have easy access to a private ballot. Unfortunately, the language that we added broke the bank and is millions of dollars. So I'm going to propose, if we reconsider this bill, I'm going to propose stripping that, and I have an amendment that I can either give out now or after, and if. No, we're not going to do that. I have an amendment, and others may have amendments as to how we can address this issue, but in an affordable way. I ask the courtesy of reconsideration. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion before us is reconsideration. That does not lock you into voting for the bill after it's amended. That's the first point. My guess is there'll be either 1 or 2 amendments to deal with some issues that are fairly controversial. And this is my personal view, but my guess is the bill in its current form will maybe be reported to the floor, but if it comes up before signing die, I'll be surprised. So that's not to say that's life. I mean, if that's what people want, that's what they want. And even if we pass it timely, the House has to act on it. So let me stop there. Let's take a roll call on the reconsideration.
To explain my vote. This issue has been really important to the folks of the disability community, and I think they finally felt like they were able to get some traction on this issue. Unfortunately, it seems like there's an effort to strip this provision out of it. You know, I think in speaking with the advocates, they have felt that they were willing to try to find a middle ground when it came to setting a percentage, but short of that, I think they felt very uncomfortable because for the past few years, this bill has not advanced, nor has the issue really moved forward, and there's been a lawsuit that's been pending for the last few years to try to address this, and it hasn't really gone anywhere. So, you know, I think the advocates want to be able to continue working on this issue, and for that reason, I can't support the reconsideration of this.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm voting yes, precisely so that we can continue to work on it. It's a very important bill. I do believe we can figure out something that works for everyone. So I'm voting yes.
reconsideration needs 8, so we do not reconsider the bill. It will go to the floor, and whatever happens, happens. Okay, let's go on to another popular bill. Well, I don't mean to be facetious. Senate Bill 536. If we can be reminded what that is.
Senate Bill 536, Montgomery County Stormwater Charges Organizations Offering Agricultural Exhibitions. This bill prohibits Montgomery County from imposing a charge pursuant to a local system of charges for stormwater management on an organization that offers agricultural exhibitions and is exempt from taxation under 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. There is an amendment in your packet begins on page 2. This is amendment number 503325/1 from Senator King. The amendment strikes the language regarding county-imposed stormwater charges and instead prohibits municipalities across the state from imposing stormwater charges on nonprofit organizations that offer agricultural exhibitions. Amendments also add a sunset provision terminating the bill on June 30th, 2023.
Okay, it was moved and seconded. Did we adopt the King amendments, or did we stop at that point? Okay. Senator Riley, you had asked for the hold yesterday. Have you gotten information that you need?
Yes, I have, Mr. Chairman, but I have another quick question.
Okay, well, let's do, well, okay, please, ask your question.
So this bill only waives the stormwater fee for 2 years? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Does anybody want to move the King amendments? I'm sorry.
Are both the sunset and the making it statewide to all municipalities.
Any objection to adopting the King amendments?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else object to adopting the amendments? The amendments are adopted. The bill as amended, the floor is open for debate, discussion. Senator Kagan, followed by Senator Hester.
Mr. Chair, I started off as a supporter of this bill. I worked with Senator King on this bill, and it's important for our fairgrounds. The problem is now it is a statewide bill. It affects every municipality. It affects every fairgrounds. Frederick County charges a stormwater management fee. For us to try to fix a Gaithersburg problem with a statewide bill is overkill. We are exploring other options to try to address the challenges the fairground has faced during COVID. I support those efforts. There are efforts that are being discussed in budget and taxation. I don't think we should pass legislation.
Senator Hester.
I was just wondering if Senator Riley could share what he learned the other day.
Yeah, this morning I spoke to Senator King on the floor. She said that she still fully stands behind the bill. There is not going to be a vote in the Montgomery County delegation because it's a statewide. Generally, there was support prior to her amendments, and she has a sense that there's support in the delegation after her amendments. That's generally what happened. It's not official.
Is there a rationale for why it became a statewide bill?
Like briefly, which is
Yeah,
that we
but-
couldn't do it for one particular, even as a local bill. Apparently, it upset the apple cart with our stormwater laws. And I suspect that Ms. Morton could explain that better, but that's the simplistic way that I understand it.
We cannot, I think it's constitutional. Constitutionally, the legislature cannot legislate for one municipality. All municipalities are treated as class. So if you are going to pass legislation restricting or enabling things for municipalities, it has to apply to all of them.
Further discussion or debate?
Sir.
Senator.
Sure. Thank you. You know, and I've had a lot of dealings with, my district with the fairs, and I can tell you, losing out on a year, whether it be one county or multiple counties, a lot of them are hurting. So I'm in favor of this legislation, and we have more money coming in for some. I know there's concerns about some of these local governments having to added expense or whatever, but there is money that's been coming in right along through CARES Act and different things. So I think somehow these local governments will survive, but some of these events, these community events, like these farm fairs and whatnot, may not survive without some help. So that's why I'm supporting this.
The bill as amended is moved to the floor with a recorded vote of 9-2. Next bill, please.
Senate Bill 597, State Board of Social Work Examiners Revisions. This is a bill sponsored by Senator Washington. This bill changes the terms for classifications of licenses under the Social Work Board from types to categories. Under the bill, the classifications of a licensed certified social worker applies to those individuals that are licensed by December 31st, 2023. The bill changes the terms of mental health to behavioral health and the practice of social work, and alters the definition of psychotherapy to include behavioral health disorders instead of mental health disorders. The bill removes licensed graduate social workers from requirements under the bill, qualifies the licensing exemption for federal agency employees by specifically stating that federal agency employees that are licensed in Maryland have to comply with the provisions of the bill. The bill also alters requirements for certified social worker clinical requirements by reducing the amount of assessment hours that are required under statute from 144 to 100. The bill finally expands processes for social worker rehabilitation efforts and prohibits a certified social worker from engaging in private practice. There is no opposition to the bill. There is a set of sponsor amendments that can be found on page 4. And essentially, these sponsor amendments adds licensing renewal protocols in place for renewal of all social work categories. It also requires submission to criminal records checks for renewals that will begin in 2023.
Discussion. Senator Washington, you want to say anything on this bill?
I was reminding myself, yes, this is, again, a situation where we had a kumbaya moment among the advocacy organization and the board and the amendments that this committee made. Again, given COVID and the need to get as many social workers able to practice in our communities, this facilitates that, and as well as making some long-needed changes and updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Washington, for that explanation, and I appreciate the work you do with social workers and in that area. The purpose of this bill, if you could just clarify the tie to COVID-19, because as I understand, this will help facilitate more social workers in the field, and 2, I wanted to understand the background check section as well.
Again, it's allowing individuals to work temporarily before they get certified. I believe that's part of it. So that's one, we can get them out of they've not been able to take some of their licensing last year because their exams were in place, had to be in person. And so there are a number of people who have graduated who just were not able to actually take their take their exams. And so this just allows them to practice with a certain amount of time. I believe we also required that there be supervision of that. The background check, I'm going to have to ask committee counsel about that. I'm not as familiar with that provision.
Ms. Foxworth, if you want to briefly, on the background checks, if you're familiar with it, to elaborate.
Well, the rationale I'm not as familiar with, but as it stands now, those that are renewing have to have background checks by 2021, and it just delays it for 2 years. So instead of the background checks being in place and a part of the renewal process by 2021, it delays it for 2 years. Now, the rationale, I'm not certain, but the amendments do add certain other procedures and protocols in place for renewal, but I don't want to assume.
Senator Cruz, I see your light's still on.
When you said that we're delaying the requirement for the criminal background check from 2021 to 2023, did you say there were other safeguards put in place since that is a delay on those checks, or?
Pull up the exact language. Now, the additions do not speak to background checks, to my understanding. So the additional requirements are fees and renewal application and continuing education requirements. So as drafted, there aren't any additional criminal history checks that are going to be in place to substitute that.
Further questions? If not, there is a sponsor amendment. Is there any objection to adopting the sponsor amendment? Seeing no lights, it's adopted, so we have before us the bill as amended. Discussion, debate? Seeing no red lights or hands, would anybody like to be recorded in the negative on Senate Bill 597? Seeing none, that'll be recorded as unanimous and sent to the floor. We're going to put 664 to the end of this list because I want to use that as a bridge to list number 31. So we're going to get to that in a few minutes, Senator. Let's go to 637.
Senate Bill 637, Community Development Administration, Live Near Your School Program Establishment. This bill requires the Community Development Administration housed within the Department of Housing and Community Development to administer a home buyer assistance program, which will provide low-interest loans for purchasing homes near the graduate or the student's school. The bill will authorize higher education institutions to provide funds that match those that are offered within the program. And it will also provide matching funds when private employers, local governments, and other higher education institutions provide similar programs. So it expands the scope of those matching funds. The bill places directives on the use of the loans that will be provided by requiring the administration to allow loans to be used for the purchase of the home and to require a home that is purchased through loan funds to be the home buyer's main residence. The bill requires the administration to oversee marketing plans. Additionally, the bill establishes the Live Near Your School program, which is a little distinct from the home buyer assistance program. This program will require the administration to administer projects that provide current students and recent graduates with grants to buy homes in sustainable communities. There was no opposition presented at the hearing. In response to the fiscal note, we have received approval from Budget and Tax. There are two sponsor amendments. One begins on page 5, and the other is that individual sheet that was passed around previously. The first that's included in your packet qualifies that the administration isn't required to administer the program, but they have permission to administer the program. So we changed may to shall and gave them the authority to, but didn't mandate them to do so. And in addition, in terms of funding, the program will be contingent upon what's available currently in the budget. So it cured the concerns that Budget and Tax had. The second amendment that is single on your desk before you applies to education requirements. And so it alters the definition of current students and recent graduates, which are those individuals that the programs will target, And it changes that definition under both programs. So current students now, as amended, will include undergraduate, graduate, and professional degree students, as well as recent graduates will include those who've met specific credit requirements to participate.
Let's have something to discuss. Is there a motion in support or opposition? Senator Riley moves that it be supported. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Senator Carrozza.
Chair, I'm just trying to understand, is the policy behind this that we believe we're promoting home ownership, which is kind of a longer-term decision, to one's place of education, which sometimes is a temporary choice, and I'm not sure I understand the alumni portion of this. So I'm just trying to understand the policy behind the bill.
So from the hearing, the way it sounded and appeared was that there are several costs or obstacles to homeownership from those who have recently graduated and incur significant amounts of student loan debt. So to be able to have programs that are set in place and to prohibit the requirement to travel for jobs that are, more affordable and maybe pay more, it would allow those obstacles to be removed and to create qualified students within our area, considering the burden that a lot of graduates have with student loan debt.
So are we trying to encourage those going to school and those graduating, and I'm assuming these higher ed, to buy homes in those neighborhoods? For example, I'm trying to figure out, is this more of a concentrated bill in urban areas? Is this, does this affect community colleges and universities statewide? In other words, I'm trying to understand the policy of where we're encouraging people to buy. And I understand the sponsor is from Baltimore, and maybe that's what we're trying to encourage, but I'm really just trying to understand the policy behind it and trying to see, since I represent Salisbury University, UMES, and Warwick Community College, is this bill going to encourage people, incentives for them to buy in neighborhoods around those three institutions?
Yeah, Senator, correct me if I'm wrong, but it does not specify. It says public institutions of higher education. So it does not limit it to any jurisdiction.
And when we talk about live near your school, so I understand that response, Mr. Chair, thank you. So is there like a radius that we're talking about? And if I missed it in the bill, I haven't read it line by line. So for instance, Salisbury University is, in Salisbury. Warwick Community College is out on Route 50 and, a little bit further away from an urban area. So I'm just trying to see what the bill would be encouraging policy-wise.
Radius that's required, Senator Carrozza. Under the Live Near Your School, there's a requirement that those projects that are administered be focused on sustainable communities. And that is pursuant to the code, and I'm pulling up the list of requirements now. But with a lot of these sustainable communities, there is a focus on some of the more blighted communities. So it doesn't specifically have a radius requirement. There aren't any additional limitations, but the focus should be on projects that have a dual focus on sustainable communities.
Question, we can always return to you, Senator Carrozza. Senator Washington?
Thank you, Chairman. In general, as a statewide issue, Maryland educates a tremendous amount of the professional population. And those people spend 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and then they move somewhere else. So we often don't have an opportunity to benefit from their taxes and from them buying homes, and frankly, from them providing healthcare or services or whatever to our schools, to our citizens. So this live near your school is sort of modeled on that live near your work, and trying to encourage people. So I would say that it could, as long as you were at a public institution, it could be contemplated that they could live anywhere. Now, certainly there are challenges in certain urban communities, but there are also, I would say, some challenges in some rural communities where maybe people could be encouraged to buy and they wouldn't otherwise. And just another note of information, for example, the state of New York has some programs where they forgive debt in order for their professional schools in order to encourage them to stay in the state. And so we're not doing that. We're simply providing them a way to buy a house. So other states are really doing a lot to keep their professional school graduates to stay in their state. And I think this is an attempt to try to do that in Maryland. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I want to follow up with the question about live near a school. I mean, that not being defined, I just don't know how that's DHCD or who is ever going to oversee this, how they're going to decide. Was there any discussion about a distance or radius? What is near? Is it, half a mile? Is it 5 miles? If you have it too broad, people are going to use this money who might not be fulfilling the mandate of the bill. And I don't have an answer for that, ladies and gentlemen. I saw that too, and it sort of concerned me a little bit. I also, to be frank with you, I think I was 30 before I bought my first house, and this says 5 years after graduation, so we're talking people between 19 and 27. I don't know if there's been any study to see how many will utilize it. But again, the distance is a concern of mine. So,
At that point, I think that's fair. The bill might not be as ready as I was just speaking to the intent, and that I think it's a good idea. And if there's a way for us to narrow that, I don't know if we do it by crossover, but it seems to me to be something that the committee should contemplate how we can support, truly, having students stay here. And given the tremendous amount of debt, my son is planning on buying a house in a couple of years. He's going to be graduating this year. I didn't buy my first house until I was 40, but some people do. So, this depends.
Thanks. Just ask if there's been an update on the House bill crossfile.
I don't have that information at this time, Senator Riley.
Pull that up. I don't know if there's any action while I go to Senator Ellis. Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so if there is a concern about distance, could we just put an amendment in to put in, say, 5 mile radius of a school? I mean, and that'll cover a good little distance away from any school. So that could solve that problem, in my humble opinion. So are you open to amendment now with the bill? Yes, we can. So I'd like to offer amendment to define the radius of 5 miles from any school covered by under this bill.
Discussion. I'm going to assume there's a second. It's in front of us. My only question, Senator, let's take, Coppin. 5 miles is probably 60% of the city. Look, again, I don't know what the answer is, Senator. In Salisbury, 5 miles from the campus, you can be outside of the town in 5 miles, probably. Again, part of it depends on what our purpose here is, and so I'm Senator Washington.
I think it's not as detailed as we'd like it to be. I'm trying to do my best effort to support the concept, but the live near your work programs usually specify blocks and are much more targeted. So it would seem that we would need to have that information, in order to really make the bill work, but,
The motion before you is 5 miles. Those that want to support the amendment signify by raising your hand. I see 6. Okay. Amendment is adopted. The bill as amended, we still have the Hayes amendments to address. I don't think we've adopted them. There's one Hayes amendment. Senator Riley.
I don't sense a real excitement. I don't know if we're going to move the needle forward. Is there any way we can hold it or put a study on it or kill it?
We can do any of the above.
I move favorable. I feel uncomfortable on changing my enthusiastic support, but I wouldn't be offended if one of my peers stepped up.
Well, if you want to withdraw your amendment, your motion,
I withdraw.
and yeah, I think they're usually the two choices. That's true. Okay. Anybody strongly object if we hold it for now? Okay. 637 is on hold. Yes.
The House heard the bill 30 days ago and has not moved. I think they're under the same attitude.
School program? No, I meant the House. Very bad, very bad. Okay. Right. Bada boom. 821.
821, alcoholic beverages, manufacturers' licenses, and off-site permits. This emergency bill makes various changes to the regulation of alcoholic beverage manufacturers in the state. Broadly, the bill repeals specified manufacturers' permits and establishes a manufacturer off-site permit and brewery special event permit. The bill also authorizes a Class 8 farm brewery license to sell beer produced by the license holder for off-premises consumption and clarifies the maximum amount of beer specified holders of Class 7 limited beer wholesalers licenses may manufacture and distribute annually. Finally, the bill essentially codifies and extends the governor's executive order allowing manufacturers to deliver and ship products produced by the manufacturers. There is an amendment in your packet. This is amendment number 7433/1, beginning on page 12, from Senator Hester. The amendment adds a sunset provision terminating the provisions authorizing the delivery and shipment of products on December 31st, 2022. Amendment also adds a provision restricting, beginning January 1st, 2023, the amount of beer that a certain license holder may sell to each consumer at an approved off-site permitted event to 288 ounces. So basically, just as a little bit of a refresher, this bill is kind of doing two things. Part of it is basically a reintroduction of the bill this committee passed last year that got stuck in the House in the shortened session. The other part is allowing for, under the amended version up until December 31st, 2022, for these manufacturers to do direct sales and shipments.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before I entertain a motion, this bill has had more deaths and resurrections than I can tell you. part of this has to do with the recovery. Obviously, we had the bill that we worked on multiple times in terms of restaurants and the package stores. This has to do with the manufacturers, microbreweries, local wineries, and also package stores, and striking a balance, which we did a couple of years ago with the Modernization Act. I think we've gotten the stakeholders to agree, and I think the House is willing to listen and actively consider what we move with an amendment. So with that, we'll entertain a motion. It's been moved. Is there a second? Second. I believe Senator Hester has the amendments for the Great Compromise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say that I think all parties should really be commended for reaching this compromise, which helps these businesses to recover during this economic fallout from the ongoing pandemic. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank you personally, because I know you spent a lot of time on the phone with various stakeholders, and I really appreciate you bringing this to life one more time. It's going to mean a lot to the distillers and the breweries in my district. And of course, the amendment here puts on the sunset, but we can revisit things if their industries don't pick up in the future. So that's what I wanted to say. April, do you want to walk through the amendment, or? I mean, I think we should all just vote it up because everybody agrees.
Before you, questions, debate, comments, seeing none. Will anybody choose to vote in opposition to the bill? Seeing none, it'll be recorded 11-0 and moved to the floor. That's 821, sorry. Okay, let's go to 931.
Senate Bill 931, Prince George's County School Facilities and Public Safety Surcharges and Report Sunset Extension. You saw this yesterday. This bill extends the termination date of Chapter 351 of 2019 from June 30th, 2021 to June 30th, 2024, which established provisions of law that reduce or exempt the school facility surcharge for certain housing units in Prince George's County, and for the county to conduct a certain review and submit a certain report to the Prince George's County Council. The bill also extends the submission date for a specified report from December 1, 2020 to December 1, 2022. There was one amendment on page 38 of your voting packet, and this amendment requires the Prince George's County to review and make recommendations on the level of funding for the school facilities surcharge and public safety surcharge and whether it meets the needs of the county, and submit a report to the Senate and House Prince George's County delegations on or before December 31st, 2021.
Senator Patterson, to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had asked to hold this bill yesterday in hopes that I would get the information to make it a little bit more comfortable for me, of which I did, and I'm okay at this point to let the bill ride.
I think we moved it yesterday. I don't think there's any objection to the amendment, which was also recommended by the delegation.
Right.
And we have a letter. Senator Ellis.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for my general knowledge and understanding, so there are some surcharges that the school system in Prince George's County will exempt. I'm not sure
Senator,
where this.
Builders, new projects,
Right.
have to pay a surcharge to help underwrite the cost of public safety and of schools. So they get charged. The county councils and the county executive have supported this. We've had it in place for a number of years. So they kick into the fund. There's obviously some debate, is it high enough? Because you put 300 new homes, you're going to have more students going into the school. And so whether that should be passed on to the builder or to the homeowner. So it's a surcharge in the county that is put on the builders, who can either eat it or pass it on.
So this bill said what does this bill authorize or don't?
We already have, Prince George's County already has it in place. It extends it, but we had a sunset on it.
Okay.
Is that right, Senator?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, anybody be voting against 931? Seeing none, this will be moved favorably, recorded as unanimous. Okay, let's go back to 664.
Okay, Senate Bill 664, Education, High School Graduation Requirements, Applications for Student Financial Aid. As drafted, the bill would require each student beginning in the 2022-23 school year as a requirement for graduation to complete the free application for federal student aid, otherwise known as the FAFSA, or the Maryland State Financial Aid Application. There's no good acronym for that. So essentially, the amendments strike this bill as it was drafted. And starting on page 6 of your packet are some changes. It was discussed in a subcommittee meeting, the Education Subcommittee. So what these amendments do would be strike the bill as drafted, including the graduation requirement. It requires each county to encourage and assist as many high school seniors as possible in completing the FAFSA or the MSFAA by the March 1 deadline for eligibility for state financial aid. It would require each county board to develop an outreach plan and provides for the contents of the outreach plan, requires submission of the plan to the State Department of Education, the advisory committee created in the legislation, and to this committee and the Committee on Ways and Means. It also requires the department and the Maryland Higher Education Commission to establish an advisory committee to provide guidance to county boards and high schools on best practices for working toward universal completion of the FAFSA and the state form. It provides for the duties of the committee, and there's a 5-year annual reporting requirement for county boards on data related to FAFSA and state form completion. The devil's in the details here, so just take a look at what those are and see if there's things that you want to suggest or don't like.
Can we have a day to look at this? I mean, we struck the whole bill, and we've got a whole new bill in front of us and expected to vote.
Well,
I mean, it's one thing if you got an amendment or two, but when you strike the whole bill in the hearing we had and put a complete new bill before us and expect us to vote in 5 minutes.
Well, Senator, let's first take a couple minutes to look it over and read it and see if there's some outstanding questions. Let's just see. I mean, it's 10:04. We have a little time. I think it's a retreat from the original bill essentially said you couldn't graduate unless you filled out a FAFSA. That's no longer here. I think the overview, not to repeat, is to encourage more people, more young people to fill out the FAFSA and come up with a plan collaboratively. And I think we did hear from a lot of the stakeholders, superintendents, community colleges, groups that offer support, nonprofit groups that offer support. So why don't we just take a couple of minutes? It's half the bill's crossed out. So let's just take a 3-minute pause and take a minute to look through it. If we still have problems in a few minutes, we'll consider that, Senator. Back to Senator Ellis in a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and colleagues. So this bill, we've worked really hard over the last few months with the House sponsors of the cross-file. We worked with the advocates, and we kind of slimmed the bill down, like the chairman mentioned. We took away a requirement for graduation. That's out. So those restrictive requirements are out. And I just want to say that we have so many of our high school students graduating without knowing about the free application for financial aid, FAFSA, or, smart kids showing up to college. We talked about that during the bill hearing. So the issue remains in one school system, according to the preamble, between 25 up to 30+% of students fill out the financial aid form. And so we need to do something about it. So we worked with the advocates. And I just want to say, you all have in your package a letter of support from MABE, the Maryland Association of Boards of Education. We work with them. So these are the Board of Education. The school systems, the high schools want to do this, and this posture of this bill. The community colleges, the colleges want to do this, and we have quite a few community organizations who are already working with students and schools to do this. So this bill is pulling a lot of these disparate groups of people together to take care of our students, our needed students who are not getting the service done. And I mean, we talk about in here looking out for the homeless children, unaccompanied homeless. And I've spoke about my experience with one of those individuals in the bill hearing. So this bill has broad support from, I mentioned, the public schools, the colleges, community colleges, and parents and community groups. So I ask for your support in moving the needle and getting this bill done this year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, colleagues.
I love the idea. I'm glad we took out the requirement, because if a school system is advocating for it, we recognize there's certain students who may not ever go to college, handicapped, disabled, that type of thing. So it removes that graduation requirement on those students who may not want to do it. My question is, should we be changing the title of the bill in the preamble to more accurately reflect the new intent of the bill?
As the amendments, I didn't finish the purpose paragraph in the title before today, so none of that reflects what's actually in the amendment.
Is there a new title?
There will be a new title and a new purpose paragraph.
I want to thank the bill sponsor for working so hard with all the advocates on this bill, and I don't want to slow it down, but I do have a question, and that is, didn't we hear a bill that talked about outreach, about like apprenticeships and stuff like that? And are we doing outreach twice then? How do those two bills play together? That's my question.
Well, this outreach are to reach out to those students and families that have not filled out the FAFSA, which opens other doors. If they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. And apparently some school systems have weekend and evening activities. It was unclear to us if all the school systems do a very systematic outreach. And again, a lot of people are in poverty. They don't know where to find some of these numbers and figures. FAFSA is not easy. For those of you who have filled it out, it can take a couple hours, even if you have a couple degrees. So if you don't, it's tough. So this is specifically because there is community college money, the promised scholarship. There's free money that's left on the table. So it's more generic, I guess, in terms of you can't get federal aid without having filled out the FAFSA. So it's just the entranceway, I guess, if you would, Senator. Senator Simon-Ayer.
And I too appreciate the goal. I guess it's just a little frustrating. You say you've worked on this for months on this bill, but I mean, it's a complete rewrite. So it looks like it's been reworked recently and worked on the issue overall. I understand that, but this is a complete rewrite. And this is a mandate on local governments. And some of us have bills in our committee that It's, we don't want to mandate down to the local government. We're going to hold your bills. And then we get a complete rewrite that's a mandate, and we're saying, let's move it. So, it just depends on which mandates we like, and it gets really frustrating. But I do appreciate the goal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for either the sponsor or the council. On page 3 of the bill, page 9 of the reprint, I wonder in the Roman 6, plans to ensure that students from the following population get the necessary information, assistance, and support. Number 1, traditionally underserved students. Is there a definition of that? And could you tell me what that is? And then I have a follow-up question depending on what the answer is.
It is not a defined term, but it is meant to reference low-income students, minority students, and any of the students that fall in those populations. It was difficult to try and find a term where, for example, some jurisdictions would, the thinking behind this, and this will give you a little context, is that trying to get more one-on-one with certain types of students who may not have access to the information about how to fill out the FAFSA or whatnot. The problem is that some jurisdictions have quite a number of those students, and then it would put an undue burden on some of those jurisdictions where they'd have to do one-on-one in some circumstances at a much higher rate. So obviously, it's for the committee's consideration to say maybe this language isn't good and you would prefer something else.
Thank you very much, Ms. Goodman. I'd like to suggest then, for the committee's consideration and the sponsor's consideration, something that's a little clearer. So traditionally underserved students, including low-income, minority students, and I'd like to add, and nowhere in this bill that I could see, were non-native English speakers. And for families who, the chairman just talked about, even if you've got a degree and all that it can take hours, if you don't understand the English language, it's even harder. And so I would love to either add them among the 1, 2, 3 and add a 4th, or in what order council believes makes most sense, or my preference would be defining, not strictly defining, but giving an indication of who traditionally underserved students include. So I would make that motion if there's a second.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
The motion, again, is in poverty, minorities, and those students where English is a second language, or whatever the right term is. Non-native speakers. And that would replace one or be in addition to one?
Defining traditionally underserved students, including.
Okay. Any, is it on that amendment, Senator Carrozza? Okay. Any objection to that amendment? Okay, that's adopted. Senator Carrozza, I'm going to get back to you, but I've got a 2-word addition, also amendment, on the very same section. It says plans to ensure that students, I think we should say, and their families, because in a lot of cases, to families. So if there's no objection there, get that assistance. I mean, that's really, in most, not in all cases, but in a lot of the cases where we run into the challenges. Any objection to that? Okay, Senator Carrozza, back to you.
Thank you. So I realize I went back to my bill file and I realized looking at the testimony from February 25th that obviously the bill has been worked through. But I saw that the public school superintendents opposed the bill. And then I went back and I looked at the reworked bill on page 9, or 3 of the packet, page 9 in the packet. And I just want to make sure I'm understanding it. It says each county board shall encourage and assist as many high school seniors as possible in completing and submitting a FAFSA. it's a shall, and then it says encourage and assist, so not sure how that works. And then it does require the local school system to develop an outreach plan and mandates what should be in the plan. So it sounds like even though this bill's been worked through, there's still, this still has a mandate on our county school system. So I didn't know if we heard back from the superintendents, or maybe they were involved in the reworking of the bill, but I was still concerned when I saw so many shalls jumping out in the bill.
I did have conversations with PSAM as after the subcommittee meeting, the chair asked all the participants and stakeholders, including PSAM and everyone else who submitted testimony on the original bill, to submit information on concrete suggestions on how to improve the bill from its original state. And so the committee did receive from PSAM, from University of Maryland, from various other stakeholders, from the delegate cross-file sponsor. And they coalesced around the idea of the advisory committee, because that's an information sharing body between higher ed and lower ed and getting best practices and information. And two, on it not being a mandate for graduation, but on these counties getting, having to be pushed just a little bit to do a little bit more to increase the numbers of students who have access to this information. So yes, they have been involved and they have been working on the ideas. So they don't necessarily have seen this version of it, but it incorporates all of the suggestions from the various stakeholders.
This is more a minor edit, but on the section that the chair was just worked on and added, and families, I'm wondering if this should say it's minor, but it might have a different context. Plans to ensure that students and families from the following populations, I think it should say receive the necessary information, as opposed to, these, quote, students and families going somewhere to get information. So I don't just...
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I have to tell you, all three of the community councils have been working overtime getting bills prepared, and I must say I pushed Ms. Goodman to move this. So if it's not her finest work, it's because she's got a lot on her plate, and I gave her a short timeline on this. So any of those suggestions are appreciated. No, it's great. And people, just like we're not perfect, they're not perfect. And if you've got suggestions, please make them. Senator.
By that at all. Please, I am not.
Thank you, Mr. So this was in the Education Subcommittee. Did it get actually voted out, and was it unanimous, and everybody on that subcommittee was good with the final product?
The subcommittee had a meeting, a virtual meeting, where we invited a lot of other people, some superintendents. I think we had a guidance counselor, we had a community college, we had someone from USM, or we had two people from USM, where we gathered all of the data. So obviously, because of our schedules and time in the last 5 days, I was not able to call it back together. So the amendments are the sponsors. And, if you're on the education subcommittee, you're not required to support it because it didn't come before you. So that's, and again, sometimes during crossover, things run a little faster and looser, and we can't always pull together the subcommittee. So for those on the subcommittee, I apologize, but this is the product we have. Further discussion. We've adopted the Ellis amendments, which is essentially the rewrite. We've adopted the Kagan amendments, clarifying or adding to number 1 on page 9, and the Pinsky amendment adding "and their families," and receive instead of getting from Senator Carrozza. So that's what we have in front of us. Look, I don't know if the House is signing off exactly on the same. They might amend it some more, and we might have further discussion. I mean, we understand that it's not a final product. Okay, seeing no further debate or discussion, would anybody like to be recorded in the red on the bill? One abstention, 10-0-1 on Senate Bill 664. Okay, now we move to the next list. And, I put this at the end because it created an advisory group. And the next list has a number of task forces, work groups, et cetera. And one of the bills on this list is Senator Beidel's from yesterday, which started out very different from what transcended. Work groups, task forces are not verboten, but there have been times over the years, and this is just free knowledge from a font of experience, and where sometimes it's a rotten bill and we just turn it into a task force. And there are years such a list would be 5 or 10 long, and there are times House of Delegates members will say, well, don't kill it, just make it into a task force. And I've probably been a time in my life where I've said the same thing to save a bill. Now, this list isn't that long. I'm pleasantly surprised. But whether we choose to think whether it moves the needle and is helpful, we should vote yes. If we think it's a waste of time and doesn't move the needle, people should feel free to vote no, or in any case. So that's the context for this list of bills. I wanted to take them all together. So if we said yes to 2 or 3 and we said enough already and then killed the rest, that's what we'll do. So with that being said, we're going to start with Senator Beidel's first. So we're going to go to 836.
I think we had a motion to move it yesterday.
I want the committee counsel to refresh us.
So Senate Bill 836, State Board of Dental Examiners, Disciplinary Actions, Disclosure Requirements, and Licensee Profiles. Prior to the amendment, the bill would require the board to disclose disciplinary proceedings to disciplinary committees that are housed within dental facilities. Would also require the board to notify facilities where dentists practice if the board believed that particular facility should be informed, and if the board felt that there was an imminent threat to patient safety. Required the board to disclose information about patient competency to the disciplinary committee if certain conditions were met. Required the board to notify the practicing facility on the issues of a disciplinary record within 10 days of disciplinary action being taken. The board also had to comply or had the option of complying with certain permissive disclosures regarding licensing authorities. The board is required to create a public licensee profile that would include a summary of all charges against the dentist, the description of disciplinary actions that were taken against the dentist. The board was required to post a consumer protection notice to notify the consumers about certain considerations that they should be advised on prior to working with said dentist. And the bill did get opposition from the Board of Dental Examiners prior to the amendments. Now the amendments that begin on page 5 of your voting packet essentially repeal all of these mandatory disclosures and repeal the permissive disclosures, and creates a task force for the study of disciplinary actions, and that's called the State Board of Dental Examiners Disciplinary Process and Actions Task Force. It outlines the members that the task force will be comprised of and states that DLS will staff it. mandates the task force to study how a complaint is filed, how many complaints are filed each year, who is eligible to file a complaint, the length of time a complaint is open, amongst other factors and considerations. There's a yearly reporting requirement, and the task force is tasked with issuing recommendations regarding disciplinary procedures as a whole.
Why am I so hot on this thing? This happened in my district in Severna Park, Maryland. The cover letter that the good senator provided to us indicated on a social media page there was 295 patients injured, and in the doctor's resignation letter, he made reference to cases that went back to 2012 on the top, 2012-243, and it wasn't until February of 2020 that the Board of Dental Examiners finally pulled this ticket. The issue that these 295 patients had, and the Senator and I, Senator Bidel and myself have, is that the Board of Dental Examiners needs to be looked at hard. We need to look at the tools that are available and the tools that need to be available. The original bill came in very prescriptive with lots of they shall get records, they shall have access, and many of which were illegal, and that's why the whole core of that bill was taken out. The task force is designed to get people talking about the issues and finding solutions. And most importantly, Mr. Chairman, Senator Bidel is absolutely ready to work on this task force. So I encourage the committee to move it forward. Thank you.
Moved it the other day or not, but I'm going to assume it moved and seconded. Anybody object to the amendments, the sponsor amendments that change it into a task force? Seeing no objection. You want to speak to us, Senator?
I have a question.
Yep.
I just have a question. Ms. Foxworth, just at the very end, page 8 or page 404 of the bill, page 8 of the reprint, this is going to be in effect for 1 year and 1 month, and it gets done June 30th, 2022, and then goes away. So they find the problems, address the problems. It just seems like a weird time to end in terms of our legislative cycle, and I wonder what your thought or the sponsor's thought, to the degree that you can discern that, might be about the timing.
So the rationale for it being that way with most of these task forces that I've seen, the kind of prescriptive date is 1 year and 1 month, and it'll go in effect June 30th of this year. So in terms of delaying it or in terms of extending the time period for the work group to convene, I don't see that as a drafting problem. I mean, we can amend it to...
I'm just curious. So we know we have one bad apple, and maybe Senator Riley can help me with this. We have one bad apple. So I assume there are other bad apples around the state. So this work group would come together with great ferocity from Senator Bidel and others, and they're going to come up with a way to address the bad apples. Then what? And again, the timing on this, then there's going to be a gap of 6 to 10 or 11 months before we have legislative action?
There's two avenues that this task force can move forward on. One is recommendations of more regulations, which enhances the tools in the toolbox, and it also gives us another 7 months before the start of the next legislative session to truly accurately craft legislation that meets muster. See, the bill she submitted didn't meet muster. So we want both the ability to do regulation at the board level and legislation if necessary. And I think that's, I'm comfortable with the date.
What I'm hearing you say, Senator, is that her bill didn't meet muster, and so this will give her time to catch up? No giggles on that? Okay, Ms. Morton got it. Thank you very much. One person got it. Thank you very much.
You're funny.
Would anybody like to be recorded in the negative? Okay, the bill passes unanimously. That's 8:36. I got to put my glasses on. Okay, we have three more bills that deal with a work group or task force, and we can decide them each on their own weight or value. Let's start with 117.
Senate Bill 117, Work Group on Minority Home Ownership, Neighborhood Revitalization, and Household Wealth Equity. This is sponsored by Senator Sidnor. This bill creates a work group on minority home ownership, neighborhood revitalization, and household wealth equity. The work group would be comprised of members that are appointed by the Senate President and the Speaker of the House, the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Chair and Vice Chair of the Maryland Sustainable Growth Commission, in addition to other members that are listed. The work group will focus on assessing the availability of housing stock within the state, assessing home ownership rates disaggregated by race, location, and socioeconomic status. They'll be tasked with reviewing mortgage application processes and reviewing obstacles to home ownership, in addition to several other focuses. Department of Housing and Community Development will provide staff. The work group will last for 1 year and 1 month, and there was no opposition presented at hearing, and there are no amendments that have been adopted.
I'm sorry. Okay, is there a motion how people, is there a motion on the bill? Not all at once. We like it, we hate it, we're blah. Where are we? Okay. We'll go to the next one. 161.
Senate Bill 161, Task Force to Study Access to Mental Health Care in Higher Education. This bill establishes the Task Force to Study Access to Mental Health Care in Higher Education. The Maryland Higher Education Commission must provide staff for the task force. In addition, the Chancellor of the University System of Maryland must appoint an individual to assist the commission with staffing. Members of the task force may receive compensation but are entitled to reimbursement for expenses as provided in the state budget. The task force must submit an interim report by December 1, 2021, and a final report by December 1, 2022. The bill takes effect June 1, 2021, and terminates May 31st on 2023. There is a bit of a fiscal impact. It will cost about $60,000 in fiscal year 2022 and $25,000 in fiscal 2023. There is one amendment from the sponsor, Senator Eckert, and this amendment adds various members to the task force, making it a total of 20 members, and adds suicidality to the issues to be studied by the task force.
Ms. Goodman, Senator Feldman had a bill in.
He withdrew it.
I understand, but was it the same topic
It was on chronic health conditions
in higher education?
for students in higher education.
Okay. Okay. Another task force. Invaluable,
Senate Bill 764, Work Group on Adaptive Reuse of Vacant Commercial Spaces. This is sponsored by Senator Washington. This bill creates a work group on adaptive reuse of vacant commercial spaces. The work group will consist of members that are appointed by the Senate President, the Speaker of the House, and several other representatives from Maryland Municipal League, and members appointed by presiding officers of the General Assembly. The Department of Housing and Community Development is responsible for staffing the work group. The task of the work group will be, amongst other things, to study the feasibility of converting vacant commercial spaces into mixed-use or residential spaces, to identify funds to assist developers interested in performing said task. The work group will last for 1 year and 1 month, and the work group is required to submit a report to the governor by November 30th of 2021. There was no opposition presented at the hearing, and there is a sponsor amendment. Sponsor amendment substitutes those individuals that are on the work group. So instead of there being a representative from a financial institution, there's a representative from a credit union. It adds 5 additional members to the work group to include residential real estate developers, a member from organizations that specialize in low-income financing, and a member from nonprofit organizations that specialize in rapid rehousing.
And we'll come back to the sponsor.
I'm happy to move the bill, but I have a question for the sponsor.
Please.
So I'll move the bill and see if there's a second, and then we can have a conversation. Okay. So I'm so deep into my 911 stuff that I'm just continuing to focus on this timetable. So my experience has been that Secretary Cavey, the secretary of the appointment secretary for the governor, works really hard, and I'm sure he makes heroic efforts, but it's really hard to get a lot of people and the right people to serve on task forces. And so it can be a slow start. You've got a report that's due November 30th, which is like 10 minutes after the bill takes effect. So June 1, they will still be recuperating from sine die. So you may not get people appointed until like August or September, and then a report is due. So I just want to check in with the sponsor and make sure that if the body were to see fit, again, does this timetable work?
Thank you for that. So I co-chair the Joint Committee on Ending Homelessness, and so this is a recommendation of the task force. What it was is that we were very close, and we did not want to bring a bill that was not baked. So we actually we've already had a couple of briefings and hearings from NCSL and a number of entities, and so even I should say the individuals interested in moving this forward, we're not going to sort of wait. The work will continue. So and we just know that I don't want to just keep putting everything on COVID-19, but the whole notion of vacant space and vacant commercial space, seems like that there's a real opportunity to do sort of private-public partnerships with commercial entities that are not going to be refilling post-COVID, that there may be some schools closing. And one of the items, and I don't want to redo the bill hearing, but just tell you just how excited and encouraged people are, is that the Lord Baltimore, a private hotel, is in a great partnership with the University of Maryland medical institutions as well as Baltimore City to provide an isolation assistance. So they have this vacant hotel. The owner said, "How can I help?" And so they're in this commercial relationship, with the entity. And so we just think that we're really primed for that, and I feel really confident that we can meet those deadlines. And if not, I'll be back here asking for an extension. But I do really think we'll come up with something that can begin to move the needle. It won't be the whole pie, but we'll have something ready by next session.
There were not amendments? There were. Okay. Anybody object to the amendments or want to debate the amendments? Okay, then we will consider them adopted. The bill as amended is before us and open to debate. Anybody wish to debate it? Seeing none, will anybody like to be recorded in the negative on the bill? Seeing no lights or hands, this will be sent to the floor and recorded as such. Okay, next list. Yes, Senator.
For list 32, I'd like to move that we make this a consent calendar, but pull off Senate Bill 303 and Senate Bill 936 and do them separate.
Any discussion? Senator Washington.
That's there's there's 421. Yes.
You really have to lean in.
Gotcha.
To get
Here
heard.
I am. Okay. So I do think we need to discuss these. I thought I was going to agree, but I think we need to talk about them.
All of them?
No, I'm looking at one at SB 421. I would take that one out. But the rest of them, I'm good.
I disagree with that.
We're taking three out. Let's just vote each one on their own merits.
Well, it sounds like you can vote. I mean, people can disagree with.
Okay, let's. Well, Senator Washington asked for another one to be added to that list. Okay, then the okay, so just so let me make sure I'm clear. So 25, 142, 358. So will you pull on 421, Senator Washington? Well, I only heard two. I heard 303 and 936 from Senator Gallion. But then I heard from Senator Washington, she also wanted to pull 421 off the consent list.
Okay, I'll withdraw that. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we're
The sponsor, it doesn't mind it, so I shouldn't. So.
we're voting on all the bills on the list other than 303 and 936. Okay, is there a motion? Senator, what is the motion on that consent list? Is there a second? Discussion? Do we need a roll call? Okay. Anybody wish to be in opposition to the unfavorable? Seeing none. 25, 142, 358, 421, 667 will get an unfavorable. Okay. Let's start with 303. I'm sorry, Senator? Yeah, we can take 30 seconds. I mean, who's got it?
I do.
Okay, just very, very briefly.
Okay, so Senate Bill 303, General Provisions, Commemorative Days, Tuskegee Airmen Commemoration Day. This bill requires the governor to proclaim the fourth Tuesday in March as Tuskegee Airmen Commemoration Day. And a proclamation must urge participation in relevant activities and observance, no opposition and no amendments.
Okay, it's been moved, it's been seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion, which is favorable? Senator.
It's amazing when we talk about specific subjects, you learn so much more. I thought that Tuskegee Airmen was a small elite group. How many thousands of men and women were in this unit? Somebody can help me? 1,600, 16,000? It was huge. It was absolutely huge, and I'm sure they served the United States for years upon years during World War II. I'm very happy to support this amendment. Thank you very much.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of, is there anybody who objects or will be voting no on 303? Seeing not, it'll be.
Senate Bill 936, General Provisions, Commemorative Days, Overdose Awareness Day, sponsored by Senator Jackson. This bill requires the governor to proclaim August 31st of each year as Overdose Awareness Day and to lower flags that have staff in observance. There were no amendments to the bill. Opposition was presented at the bill hearing.
A lot. I got to tell you, I'm afraid next year it'll be on fentanyl addiction or overdose, and then it'll be on heroin addiction. And now we're getting into when to put the flag down at half-mast. Look, I think this is important. That's why I voted, I think it's an important issue, but I also, and concerned about the Indigenous Day and Christopher Columbus Day I have problems with. I would like to see Emancipation Day have more notice. I'm just not sure this rises to the level of the Tuskegee Airman and why it's not in the other category. So, I'm fine if there's no motion or if it's unfavorable. I know it was separated out, and I'm sympathetic. Senator.
Just a little background. Our office I have a cousin who died of a heroin overdose roughly 6 years ago. It was my best friend's son. And I apologize for I bring to you sooner about we talked about these different bills, but honestly I kind of missed this one at the end of the list when I was looking through. And our office has reached out to the governor's office about having that a flag flown at half staff on that day anyway. But I'm fine if there's no motion on this and it just goes that way, honestly.
Excuse me, seeing no motion, that will go the way of a few other bills. Okay, first of all, thank you. Thank you for being thoughtful about this. And I shared with Senator Gallion, we didn't take up a lot of bills that we killed because they take time. I think next year we might go back into doing that, but this was an odd year. Senator Huff raised the issue that very few bills have been killed, and in earlier years we have killed bills. If bills are not ready for prime time or not appropriate or don't move the needle or we don't like the policy, we should feel comfortable voting no, whether it's a member of our own committee or our own party or whatever. That has not been where we spent our time this session. It doesn't mean we'll always be in that posture. But I appreciate us taking a leap on at least this list. I saw a couple lights. I saw Senator Ellis, and I saw either Hester or Lamb light go on. Senator Ellis.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sometimes you snooze and you lose, and so that parliamentary procedure of the consent, and which I ended up going unfavorable on my own bill. I don't think that's too smart. So could I go on as going against that consent? Yes. So it was unfavorable. So I would go on as no. Is that okay? Thanks.
For this afternoon. I know some of you have been given reports for this afternoon. I don't know if we're going to be in for 2 or 3 hours. I do not believe we will be voting before session tomorrow. It's now 11 instead of 12, and I know some people have commitments before then. Is there a chance we could vote afterwards? There's a chance, but unlikely, but there is a chance. If we start at 11, I don't think we're going. I don't know how long we're going to go. We still have other bills. It doesn't mean they are dead. We'll give another look and try to come up with another list, and that's sort of where we are. Okay. Thank you. Get some rest, get some lunch. Work.